This is Kaylie Yee, and you're listening to the Studio Success Formula podcast.
Welcome to the Studio Success Formula podcast, the business school for dance studio owners. And now for your host, Clint Salter.
Hello, dance studio owners. It's Clint Salter from Studio Success Formula, and thank you for joining us. Today's guest is hardworking, determined, and very passionate. She's currently dancing with Britney Spears on her Piece of Me show in Las Vegas and has danced with other artists, including Taylor Swift, Kylie Minogue, and Jessie J, just to name a few. She's also a friend, and I wanted to bring her on the show today to talk about her dance journey from growing up in a dance studio thanks to her mum to securing roles on major musicals and dancing with international artists. Studio owners, this is certainly going to be an interview that you'll want to pass on to your students. Please welcome our guest on the show today, Miss Kaylie Yee. Hello, Kaylie.
Hey, Clint.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Great to have you. So, Kaylie, it's awesome to be speaking with you today, and I've given our audience a brief background on you. But can you give us a little bit more information and more specifically how you started in dance?
No problems. I think that's actually the nicest way anyone's ever introduced me. It kind of made me feel proud of myself. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But like you said, thanks to my mum and my dad as well. They own a dancing studio in Sydney, the Glendier School of Dance. And so growing up, I was definitely lucky enough to have it all there with their dancing studio. And it was, when people say it's a studio is their second home, like that really, to me, it was my second home for sure. I was there every afternoon, always dancing. But I guess it wasn't till I was probably around the age of 11 that I actually really started to love dancing and started to really want to do it. Before that, it was a hobby for me, and it was something that I did just because all my friends were there and my family was there. Yeah, I guess at the age of 11, it was the first time that I started to get a little taste of jobs that were coming my way. And my best friend at the time was Nikki Webster, and she had just done the Olympics, and she started to get into the pop thing. And so I was dancing for her, and I got a bit of a taste of touring and dancing all around Australia. So that was kind of a bit of a introduction to the industry, which I was lucky enough to have so young. Yeah, I just remember one of my dance teachers actually took me to a Janet Jackson concert that was at the Entertainment Centre. And I remember that it was the first time I actually saw dancers on stage, like a live performance, that it wasn't a musical. And it was like, because Janet was so cool and so hot at the time, it was the first time that I was like, wow, you can make a living out of this, like this could be a career thing for me. Growing up in a dancing school, mum and dad gave me enough opportunities to sort of get jobs and things, but it wasn't until I was, starting to be a teenager that I really started to love it and started to want to make it a career.
Yeah. And so what, kind of talk us through, because, you've said that you're really grateful for that opportunity. And I think there's some times where it's great to be the daughter of the studio owners and sometimes when it's not so great. I mean, we've got a lot of listeners, and I know a lot of our members in Studio Success Formula who have their children dancing at the studio. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, the pros and the cons of that?
Yeah, definitely. I actually get this question, Mum and I get quite a lot, and I guess everyone has their own sort of experiences, but for me, growing up in the studio was one of the best things because as a child, I was a really shy kid, quite the opposite to my brother. He was the one that always loved to do competitions and loved to be out there dancing all the time and sort of showing off. But
has that changed?
No, that definitely hasn't changed. But for me, I was always really shy. And so, mum and dad having the dancing studio, there's always like that kind of standard that your children are going to be great if you're the dancing teacher, and if you own the studio, there's already sort of something set there. But for me, it was like the question was, is she going to dance today? Is she going to get up in the competition? And they really never knew because it was always hot and cold with me. Sometimes I'd be happy to get up there and do it, and then other times I would just be so shy that I wouldn't want to. So mum and dad always tell me stories about how they used to just have to let me go and sort of do whatever I wanted, and they could never pressure me or push me into doing anything that I didn't want to do, because they knew I would completely go the opposite way and probably quit. So for them, it was difficult encouraging me and being supportive, but also letting me sort of go and make my own decisions. And I guess that kind of worked out well for me, because they weren't too pushy, and it made me decide on my own that I wanted to dance. So I feel like a lot of kids these days get into it so young, and their parents sometimes want it more than they do. And especially because it costs so much money, and, they put so much time and effort into it now. And I think that sometimes kids don't make the decisions on their own, and parents push them. And I think I was fortunate enough that mum and dad obviously had a lot of other people to worry about as well, owning the studio. So they never really pushed me, and that worked out for the better. But in saying that, I did, when I got to my teenage years, I did go through a bit of bullying as the studio owner's daughter. And there was a bit of like, oh, she only gets that because she's the daughter, or, she's only doing this job because she's the daughter, and those sort of things, which kind of comes with it. And I think even though that, to me, it always came as a shock, because I could never understand why people didn't see that, hey, I'm just working as hard as you are, or I'm still in every class just because my mum owns the studio. It doesn't mean that I don't have to work hard in the class, or it doesn't mean I don't train like everyone else. So it was always hard for me to understand why people just automatically thought it was because of my mum. But, if I didn't have that, and if I didn't have that sort of bullying to make me realize, who I really was and why I was doing it, I had to actually stop and evaluate, okay, this is one of the things that's going to come your way. And, I think it was the first time that I realized this industry is going to throw you a lot of obstacles. And it was the first time that I actually thought, okay, I need to prove myself, not just for the other people that are questioning me and abilities and opportunities that I was getting, but also to prove it to myself that I really wanted this career, and I wasn't just doing it because of my mom and her contacts or because of her studio. So I think in the end, it kind of worked out to be, for the best.
Yeah. And I mean, you were having, it wasn't just your mum that was teaching you. I can imagine that, during those teenage years, you were having a lot of different teachers as well.
Yeah, I definitely was. I was lucky enough that mum was always employing as many teachers as she could, and people of all different styles, from musicals to people coming from overseas and all of that. So I was getting a lot of versatility, and there was a point where she wanted to move me to another studio, thinking that maybe that was best, that I would go somewhere that I wasn't the dance teacher's daughter. I was like, if I can't dance at your studio, then what's the point? Like, she was giving me all these great opportunities and all this training, so I didn't really feel like I wanted to go anywhere else,
Yeah, exactly. Now, let's talk about some of those teachers that you had growing up, because I always talk about, the teachers are the backbone of your studio. So what are some of the lessons you learned from those teachers as you were getting older, into your teens, and getting into wanting a career in dance? What are some of the lessons that you were taught that you've carried through with you into your professional career?
Gee, I had a lot of really wise teachers, actually, now that you bring it up. But there's one thing that I do remember, and that was the first time that I ever met. We did a masterclass with a teacher, Keith Hawley, and it was the first time I'd ever met him. So I didn't know him before the class, but I remember taking his jazz class, and then afterwards he kind of questioned me just about myself, and we had like a general sort of chat. But then I remember I got home, and my mum said to me that he had spoken to her afterwards and said he thought that I was a great dancer, but he thought I really needed to work on presenting myself. And he said that I had a lot of troubles with confidence and that I couldn't look him in the eye when we were having a conversation. Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because, mum sort of just passed on the message. And when you're a teenager, I guess you don't really think about things like that. You just think, I was just there to do the class, and then afterwards he was questioning me, and so I just sort of had a conversation and that was it. But I guess at the time, he was sort of trying to suss me out and see what I wanted to do. And by then I definitely knew that I wanted to dance, but I didn't realize that, people are always, it's not just what you do in the dance class, but it's how you talk to people and it's how you present yourself and how you introduce yourself. And it's that there's such a big importance on the social factor as well of the industry.
And that's, and I think that comes down to building relationships.
Oh, completely. And that's exactly it. It's the whole networking thing. And I guess now with social networking, we can choose what we want people to see. We can put up photos or, you can put up little blurbs on your Facebook or Instagram or whatever. But I guess, when I was 15, it wasn't as big. It was, it was getting bigger. And every time I meet someone new now, or I get an opportunity with a new choreographer or a different audition that I don't know the panel, I always think about how he said that I couldn't look at him in the eye and that it said a lot about my personality. And I think it's so true because now that I've been on the other side and I've kind of had to employ other dancers for choreographers and things, it makes such a difference. Like you do remember someone by a great conversation or by a really nice, genuine personality, someone that's bubbly and interesting to talk to. It's not just about their dance skills. So I think that was one of the biggest lessons that I ever learned. Really.
And I think that's great because when you talk about lessons, that's not attached to anything really physical in terms of being a dancer, but it's very important to pick up those skills so that you can carry them forward if you want a career. And you're saying now, you're casting dancers, you're assisting employing dancers. And if you're working with these people as well, you want to work with people that are going to be fun and energetic and positive.
Oh, completely. Yes, exactly.
That's great. I love it. And a great lesson for our studio owners to pass down to their dancers that, want a career in the entertainment industry, because we all know at the end of the day, you can be the most amazing dancer, but you can get two dancers standing next to each other that have the same, technical ability, but what is that extra, that X factor that is going to get them across the line? And it could be that eye contact with a warm handshake and a nice hello.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I have also taken that on with my teaching as well, because, I had such great teachers who were always willing to give me so many stories or personal experiences or bits and pieces of advice. And exactly how Keith, through my mum, but still gave me that piece of advice. I take that on now because as a teacher, I don't want to just teach steps. I want to teach more about dancing and more about being a person, because as a dancer, to be successful, you have to take it on as a full lifestyle. And it's the same as, being a teacher. My mum with the studio, it's a complete lifestyle. And if you don't embrace everything, it's just steps and it doesn't really mean anything,
Exactly, 100%. Now, you've worked really hard to get where you are today. And I know that it hasn't been without its, fair share of you getting no's and we call it rejection, but basically, showing up, going for an audition or, going for a tour, whatever it might be, and you're not right for that, that particular job. I mean, what's been one of those times where you've received a no for a show or a tour that you felt really broken by, and what did you do to then pick yourself back up and move forward?
Ooh, good question. I've definitely had my fair share of no's, as you said, and a couple that will always stick with me, a couple that really, did put a dent on things. And I think the one that comes to mind most of all is when I auditioned for So You Think You Can Dance. I guess in the first place, for me, still being that shy kid that I once was, but learning to get through that, I finally gained up all the courage that I needed to audition for the reality TV show. And, it takes a lot of courage to go for a show like that, because you know that, well, a lot of people know it's not just about the dancing. It's about the story and the background and your journey and that sort of thing, on top of being talented. So it was kind of a big risk to take in the beginning for me, because I was worried about how it would make me look, and I was worried about, what sort of would come out and if I was strong enough to take that on. But I went through all the auditions, and I went through it with some of my best friends that I still am so close with now. And I got down to the boot camp, and we did all of that in the 5 days where, it's you stay up all night and you're doing challenges and dancing and all of that. And it was a great experience. And then I did my top 40 solo, and then I walked that red carpet. And when I got to the bottom, the judges all said to me that my journey wasn't strong enough, that when I started the show, I was already a strong dancer, and they said I had already had my head on my shoulders, and I didn't sort of lose it enough, and I didn't gain anything through my journey, because they said I was already strong to begin with. So I guess when you're auditioning for a show and, you really want it, that's not what you want to hear, really. You don't want to hear that you're already a good dancer and that they can't do anything for you, So that was really tough for me, seeing all of my friends get into the show. And of course, at the moment in the time, I didn't think it had anything to do with the fact that I just thought I was a bad dancer. That's all I kept thinking. I couldn't get it out of my head, and I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, you're not good enough to be on the show. So it was really hard, and it took, a little while. And I guess I was lucky enough to have the right people around me. I was lucky enough to have good friends and a great family that was really supportive and could understand what I was going through. It takes a great support network to get you through those bad times, when at the time you think it's the world, and I just thought everything was going to be ending and that I couldn't dance anymore. And we get dramatic, and, and you can't get your head around it. Yeah. But it took a lot, and, you just sort of, I was lucky enough to have people that supported me. And then I started to get back out there again and just get back into classes and teaching. And then before I knew it, I was starting to book some jobs for different artists that were going to be performing on So You Think You Can Dance. And so I guess, with a few little things that kind of went the right way for me, I started to keep going and keep pushing. And then I eventually got to the point where I looked back and I was like, well, maybe I wasn't strong enough at the time to be put on that show, and maybe it wasn't for me. Other things start to come your way, and you realize that one thing that I really wanted before that I didn't get, well, maybe it wasn't right, because if I took that path, I wouldn't have gotten the jobs that I did get, and I wouldn't have been introduced to people like the Squared Division, who I then kept working for, and now I'm at where I am because, well, big part to them, So you kind of get to a point where you can look back and you learn from that no, or that, rejection, and you learn from it, and then you keep pushing forward because it just wasn't meant to be at the time.
Exactly. And hindsight's a great thing,
Yeah.
being able to, go through that process thinking that, your world was basically over. And you wouldn't dance again, and you wouldn't get booked, and you weren't good enough for that show, so it means I won't be good enough for anything else. I mean, everyone's been through that.
Exactly. You go through that big dramatic phase where it's just, you're not good enough and I don't want to go on,
Yeah, and I think what you said was really important. This is so beautiful for dance studio owners to hear who maybe might not have ever taken this journey themselves, but have students that want to be dancers, that want to be performers, because having that support network, those people around you that believe in you, that can reassure you, that can tell you it's going to be okay and you're going to be fine, and basically to give you a bit of a kick up the butt sometimes and say, get over it, get up and get out there.
Yeah, exactly. You need those people who kind of know you as well. So everyone's different. You might need a week, you might need a month, but you sort of need that nurturing and that support. And then by the end of it, they can be like, all right, time's up, get over it, move on now because you're better than this,
Yeah, exactly. Put the magnums back in the freezer, get off the lounge and stop watching Sex and the City.
That's exactly right.
Now, I want to talk, many dancers think that once they get a job, they're in a show. You're dancing with Britney at the moment. Lots of dancers would think, great, once I've got that opportunity, I'm set. I'm going to book lots of other jobs. I don't need to work on my craft. I don't need to do any other training. It's kind of like I've arrived. I mean, how do you stay mentally and physically fit and continue your development even though when you're working on a show or on tour?
Yeah, good question. For me, like I've never been the one that like I don't love going to the gym. I actually really hate it. Like I find it so hard to motivate myself just to go to the gym, but I guess it's one of those things that you have to stay physically fit in our show, especially it's a 90-minute show that we do 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. And in that 90 minutes, I think we probably have about 5 minutes altogether of off time where we're getting changed. So it's really physically hard. So I do enjoy running though. As much as I hate the gym, I still go and I still take yoga classes and do a whole lot of different exercises. But I also love running, and it's something that I love doing kind of outdoors. I run, there's a park just across the road from me. So it, even though it's keeping up your cardio, I love it because I'm outside and it's a time where I don't have my phone and I don't have to email
no
anything back.
No Facebook, no email. Imagine a life without that.
Exactly. Well, that's it. You don't feel like you have to answer that message that came in or the email or whatever. And while I'm running, it's just like a time to clear my head. So I think that in itself is like something that I always try to do. And then the other thing is too that like I actually love teaching, because for me it's like it's the best kind of exercise because I'm actually dancing the entire time, and I'm always pushing myself to just keep dancing with the kids because it's kind of a way to get in a class yourself. And I don't see it as working out when I'm actually teaching. I just like I'm sweating the entire time and I'm on my feet, but it's also fun. So I kind of try and do that as much as I can in all my breaks, and try and mix it up a bit, because I just think only going to the gym or only doing one type of exercise it just gets so boring for dancers, because we're so used to doing all different things all the time and all different types of styles and stuff. So I don't know, I just try and mix it up as much as I can, really.
Yeah, definitely. Creative type likes to keep things exciting.
Exactly. But it's such an important thing that we're constantly thinking about, especially, when you've booked a show or when you're on tour, or doing a musical, whatever the job is that you've booked, if it goes for a long time, it's even harder than something that's only just going for a short time, because even though you've got that job and you've got that security, the other side of it is that they've booked you the way you looked when you were booked. So it's really hard to not change during that time that you're, booked on that show. So it's something that constantly comes up about keeping fit and keeping healthy. And, it's one of those sensitive subjects, but it's the industry we're in. And when you're up performing for people and in costume and people are taking photos and videos of you all the time, it's something that's it's always in your face, and it's always something that you have to, deal with. So
that's
it's
right.
Important.
Those square division boys can easily get some vision from when you open with Britney on YouTube
exactly.
to what you're like now.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. You got to stay the same.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great lesson as well. And what I love about a lot of dance studios now is they're incorporating, these fitness classes, into their dance classes. They're doing boot camps, they're going out for runs. Sometimes they're heading to the gym as a group of students. And I think that that's really important because, yes, you know, the dancing, the classes, some people are doing, you know, what feels like 100 classes a week. So they're staying pretty fit. But realistically, like you, when you're out and you're doing a few shows a week, or if you're in a musical, you know, 8 shows a week, you still need to be doing the other activities to, you know, to maintain what you've got and get stronger. I think that's the thing as well. It's about getting stronger and, you know, skilling up even when you've got, you know, even when you're on a show.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because I think the most important thing that I try and keep reminding myself too is that even though I'm where I am right now, like, and dancing for Britney, it's like, it's really it's a dream come true, but you still have to keep thinking about what's next and what's to come and getting better and still learning more and taking more in and all of those things, because the reality is that you might have booked this job right now, but there's still, you know, 10,000 other dancers who are ready to book the next job. And so you have to stay up with it, because if you want to keep dancing and if you want to keep going, there's always going to be more people that want that same job that you do. And just because you have a job right now, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the next one, you know? So it's important to keep working hard. And I think it also makes me feel better to know that I'm still working hard, you know, not being lazy.
Yeah, exactly. Still moving forward.
Yeah,
Kaylie, what was, I mean, to give us an insight, what was the process like auditioning for Piece of Me with Britney? So, because we've got a lot of studio owners out there who have students that, you know, might want to follow in your footsteps. I mean, how did you prepare for that, and what process did they take you through?
Sure. The audition process for this job was actually huge. It was something that just I could never have imagined. I was actually working on the X Factor Australia at the time. So I was working with the Square division when they started auditioning for the job. So the first part of it for me was I was with them as they were sifting through thousands and thousands of headshots and resumes of American dancers. And I think by the end, they kind of got it down to about 500 females and 300 males that were actually accepted to physically audition for the show. So I missed the first round of auditions, but I know that they did about 3 days of auditions. They taught 3 different routines, and they just kept cutting people as it went. But because I was in Australia, I had to send off a video submission to the creative director, because it wasn't just the choreographer's opinion. It definitely went out to the creative director and his team, the choreographer's team, as well as Britney's management and herself. So it was a big panel of people that were deciding. And once I got accepted, then I was able to come over to the States, and I was there for the second round of auditions, which we had to perform the 3 routines that were learned. So 2 of them were just the female routines, which we did on our own. And then the third routine was with a partner, with a male partner. So the day that I got there for the audition, we started at maybe 8 a.m. in the morning, and we just started with rounds of about 15 girls each. So we would come into the studio and they would put us into lines, and we would perform each routine maybe twice each. And then they'd say thank you, and we'd wait outside until everyone else had their turn. And then we'd all come into the room, and this was actually the most crazy bit about it for me. They asked us to stand in a line, which, you know, was my first day of being in the States on a visa. So I was standing in this line, you know, amongst another 100 girls that I didn't really know, had just met that morning. And they put on some music so we couldn't hear what they were talking about. And we just had to stand there in front of them, and they just talked about us. And they sifted through photos, and they were doing things at their desk, but nobody knew what was happening. We were just standing there, and it probably went for a good 10 minutes.
It would have felt like 2 hours.
Exactly. It felt like so long, and you're just looking at the girl next to you like you're trying to make a joke, because you don't really know how to feel about this situation, but you don't want to be too serious, because you just don't want to freak yourself out. So we just stood there, and then they were like, thank you. And then we went outside, and someone came out and then read a whole lot of names out, and they were like, those people are staying. To anyone else that we didn't announce, thank you, for coming and for your time, etc. So then it all happened again and again until it finally, 3 or 4 hours later, we got down to maybe 15 girls and 15 boys. And so by this time we had done so many rounds of dancing and so many rounds of standing there in front of the panel being talked about and whatever, until it got to the point where they said, okay, you guys can take a 20-minute break, and we're just going to wait for Britney to come in, and she's going to make the final decision. So, of course, that was like, if you weren't already nervous and exhausted and, feeling a million different emotions, when you hear that Britney's going to come and watch you dance, it was like everything just, you kind of don't know whether to be excited, whether to be jumping up and down. I was like so nervous and so scared, and, a million things are running through your head. But we were all just outside trying to stay warm. And I think it felt like a 5-minute wait, really. I don't remember it feeling long, but next minute, one of the choreographers comes outside and says, okay, we're going to look at the girls first, so please come in. And we walked in, and she was sitting behind the panel, and she was just so sweet and lovely. And she was like, hi, thanks for coming, sort of thing. And we were like, well, no, thank you for coming. Thanks for coming to watch us dance, sort of thing, Yeah. And we danced for her once. And she was like, thank you. And then we left, and then the boys danced for her. And then it was like waiting. So we're sitting outside waiting and waiting and waiting. And then they called in 8 boys and 7 girls. And, by this time it's past lunchtime and we're all exhausted, but you're just still on the edge of your seat waiting to see what happens next. And Anthony from the Square Division actually came over to us, and he said, congratulations, we want to offer you the job.
Wow.
And it was like, it happened on the spot, which it's never happened to me before, that you get told on the spot if you've got the job or not. And I remember everyone was jumping up and down and hugging each other, and because they all knew each other from past jobs, and and I knew 2 people, one other Australian, Morgan, and then another Australian who had moved over there many, many years ago, Zach. And I just remember I was so tired and so excited and overwhelmed that I just fell to the floor, and I was just like crying my eyes out, thinking like, oh my gosh, what happens next? Like, I just left home and I was like, bye guys, I'm going to audition, and now I'm never going back again. Like, it was the most craziest day I've ever had, really.
That's thank you for sharing that, because it's a great insight. And I know lots of different, I know auditions run different ways, but that's a great insight into what you had to do to become a dancer for Britney. Great insight. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Well, it's like in Australia, it's hard because a lot of the jobs that happen, our industry is much smaller. So a lot of the jobs that happen, the choreographers will have already known you from other jobs, or you get recommended to them for certain things. There are auditions, but, not as big as for something like a Britney Spears show. And for me, that was my first big audition in the States. And then afterwards, I was saying to everyone, like, does this happen all the time? Because I don't really know if I'm cut out for this. Like, that was exhausting for me, just being there for those 5 hours, going through all those emotions. And all the other dancers were like, yep, this is exactly what we go through, like week after week.
Week after week, I was going to say, it'd be all the time.
That's it. They just, they just always go. And if you don't have an audition for 1 week, everyone's stressing out because that's what they're so used to. It's just, it's a lot over there.
Yeah, exactly. Different ball game. And I mean, look, just over 50% of our studio owners in our program are from the US. So we've got lots of US studio owners that are listening.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's what their students have got to look forward to.
Yeah, totally. Get ready.
Get ready. Awesome, Kaylie. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. If people want to get in touch with you, you're on Facebook, you've got Instagram, they can find you there.
Yeah, definitely.
They can find you in plenty of YouTube videos, I'm sure, of people filming the show with their phones.
Oh, yes, there's thousands of them. I'm always tagged in photos of fans, so.
Yeah. Oh, well, that must be really nice for you.
It is nice, but then, everyone has a good day and a bad day. And I think sometimes on your bad day, you don't want to see photos of, things that have gone wrong but you can't help it. They're always there. They'll always be seen.
They're always there. Look, really lovely to reconnect with you. And I'm so glad to hear how well you're doing. Like I said, though, it's come with, the hard work, the determination and the passion. So
thank you so much for this interview. It's been wonderful talking to you again.
Do you have a burning business question for Clint? Are you coming up against a challenge in your studio that you need help with? Go to studiohotseat.com today and record your question for Clint. If you're lucky, Clint will answer your question in an upcoming podcast episode. Get expert help today from someone who works with hundreds of dance studio owners every year. Again, head to studiohotseat.com to record your question for Clint today.